Hello, and a very good morning to you, Grenada, and the rest of the world. George Grant here with the Monday edition of Good Day Grenada. Thank you very much for joining us under beautiful sunny skies here on the Spice Isle. I am very pumped up about this morning's program because some very interesting stuff, which we're going to wrap up with this morning. Those of you who watched yesterday's edition of Sundays with George Grant will actually be seeing a rebroadcast of a segment of that program. We don't have the time this morning to bring you the entire thing, but we'll tell you about that in just a wee bit. So, having said that and done a little introduction, everything seems to be working fine here. Let's take a look at the rundown, see what we got cooking over the next hour. Now, Grenada is stepping up its climate change mitigation and adaptation efforts. What's that all about? Well, I'll tell you. On Thursday and Friday of this past week, there was a seminar of sorts held here down at the Radisson, down at Grenadians, and I attended that. All has to do with climate change. You'll get the details in just a wee bit, but all I'll tell you at this point is that I did speak with a couple of people who were very much involved in making presentations at that workshop. And I spoke with them, and they'll tell you why they were here and exactly what it is they're doing. To make a long story short, it seems like Grenada is really stepping up its efforts to mitigate against and adapt to climate change. So we're going to run that in the very first segment. After that, we'll get directly into the national report from the GIS. And again, I must remind you that what you're going to be watching this morning is what was sent to us on Friday night. Okay? The national reports usually come in on very late on a Friday afternoon or early in the evening throughout the week. And as a result, since this program is aired at 9 o'clock in the morning, we're not able to bring it to you on the same day that it's put out. So we bring it to you as close as possible, which is the following morning. So the national report's coming your way at 9 o'clock. No, right after we do this morning's first story, which is about climate change. Um, as I speak to you, one of my meteorologists has already shown up on Facebook this morning, Peter Bishop. Peter Bishop is saying, "Good morning from Long Island, where it's 38 degrees Celsius." 38 degrees Celsius? I don't believe that. I don't believe that, Pedro. If you told me it's 38 degrees Fahrenheit, yeah, I might believe you. But 38 degrees Celsius? Man, you must be burnt to a crisp. Check it out. Check it out. 38 degrees Fahrenheit. So says Pedro from Long Island. And after we do the national report this morning, we will bring you, as I mentioned, that segment from yesterday's edition of Sundays with George Grant. I pulled out the very first part of that interview we had, and boy, let me tell you, a lot was said. A lot, a lot was said. And I just felt it was important to bring the other side of the story because I've been publishing a lot of. I don't have a reporter in Venezuela, okay? So the information that we publish on the GrenadaBroadcast.com website is information which we usually get from various media institutions around the world, whether it's the BBC or CNN or whoever. And people have been complaining to me. It seems like it's always lopsided, always lopsided. Maduro is being made to look like a total disaster. And then one night this past week, I did see a clip where some Grenadians actually came out and started speaking up in defense of Mr. Maduro. And so I thought I'd ask them to join me yesterday, which they did. And let me tell you something, man. Let me tell you something. If nothing else, you have to sit around and wait to watch that segment we're going to run by you. We'll probably run that just a little after 9:30 this morning. It runs for about 22 minutes, and it's very, very important stuff. You need to hear it with your own ears, and or watch it with your own eyes, okay? So, that segment, by the way, is captioned Grenadians vociferously defend Maduro. Now, before we get to that, we do have other business to take care of. Before I start the other business, you guys out there in the audience are very important to me, and so I don't like to ignore you guys. So before we get too far behind, let me say we've already said good morning to Pedro in Long Island. We're also joined now by Sharon Elizabeth Roberts Wilshire. Sharon, guess who phoned me on, I think it was, Saturday afternoon when the West Indies whooped the daylights out of out of England? Yeah, man. Just a few weeks ago, Winthrop was in here with us, and we were talking about cricket. And I'm sure you all saw his exuberance, his anticipation, his excitement. And so as soon as the game ended, who was on the phone? Yeah. Well, I'm sure he told you that he has been recruited to join you in here on Wednesday morning. Yeah, man. We're going to be talking cricket. So let's see here. Sharon says, it's nice and warm here in St. Paul's. I'm back. Welcome back. It's good to have you back. So instead of us chatting via Zoom with you out there on your laptop and we're Central America and Southern Florida and all over the place, I am looking forward to actually having you sit right here. We're also joined by Glenn Andrew Mark, who's saying good morning, and he's sending you greetings from Michigan. Don't know what it's like out there in Michigan, but I'm sure it's not 38 degrees like Peter says it is in New York. Anyway, good to have you, Glenn. Now, Grenada is accelerating its efforts to fall in line with global strategies to adapt to and mitigate against climate change. When speaking about climate change, two action words often come up: adaptation and mitigation. What does it mean for Grenada to adapt to and mitigate against climate change? In adapting to climate change, Grenada is taking action and implementing measures to become more resilient. These measures include increasing storage of water through rainwater harvesting, protecting coral reefs, mangroves, and our coastal areas from erosion, building and maintaining drains to avoid flooding and landslides, and building strong homes which can withstand the strong hurricane winds and rain. At the national level, 12 programs of action for adapting to climate change were developed and approved by government in the National Climate Change Adaptation Plan. For short, we'll call it NAP, N-A-P. The NAP represents a comprehensive set of programs and actions that form the basis for stakeholders to implement within annual work programs and also for accessing climate finance locally and internationally to make these programs of action a reality. Mitigating climate change means taking actions to reduce Grenada's emissions of greenhouse gases, which contribute to climate change. These actions include increasing the use of renewable energy in the national production of electricity, reducing emissions in the transport sector by switching to low-emission vehicles, generating electricity from waste, switching the cooling sector to natural refrigerant-based appliances, and increasing and preserving acreages under forests and natural vegetation. Before I continue, let me say that, hold on a sec now. I know a lot of you, some of you are rolling your eyes out there, and some are saying, what is he talking about? That all sounds good, but are we really doing these things? You know what I'm talking about. Continuing. Grenada's efforts to address its greenhouse gas emissions are detailed in its National Determined Contribution, for short, NDC, presented to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. Whilst Grenada's emissions are not significant in the global context, representing less than 0.0005%, it is still important for Grenada to commit to mitigation measures because of its commitment under the Climate Change Convention, which requires it to join the global effort to keep temperatures below 1.5 degrees Celsius. This will also result in Grenada keeping pace with new and improved technologies and opportunities for accessing international funds to finance its adaptation and mitigation actions. On January 31st and February 1st, the Government of Grenada and the NAP Global Network, in collaboration with the Integrated Climate Change Adaptation Strategies in Grenada, hosted a 2-day national workshop on, quote, scaling up adaptation, strengthening alignment of the National Adaptation Plan process, and the nationally determined contributions in Grenada. This workshop targeted the climate change focal points for different ministries, statutory bodies, utility companies, as well as private sector entities, CSOs, and the media. And it was tailored to help participants identify the synergies between the two policy documents, NAP and NDC, and to strengthen the connections between different government departments and representatives working on parallel policy processes. The overarching goal being to scale up and advance the implementation of Grenada's adaptation needs and goals. I spoke with two of the persons who contributed to that workshop, Ernesto and Yamid. Take a look. Give a listen.
My name is Emerson Rezende. I am a climate change advisor with the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations.
Okay, right now you're in Grenada because?
I'm here to participate in a workshop about advancing the developments of a national adaptation plan on climate change and another important policy on helping the country to mitigate the impacts of climate change.
I would imagine that, because of the importance and the concerns that are being raised about climate change, the FAO would have this as one of your major priorities. Why?
Indeed. From a very specific point of view, food security. These islands in the Caribbean, as many other islands around, are very concerned about food security today and tomorrow. So from a standpoint where we know that production of today is already suffering from a number of development issues, we add climate change to this basket. We see that the impacts are multiplying and making people's lives harder.
Do you feel that regional governments are giving the sort of importance to climate change that they are at this point in time?
I believe countries are making efforts at different levels, and with the support of international organizations as the FAO, we try to advance this agenda, but also integrate with so many important other agendas, because we know that climate change is a very cross-cutting issue. So we know that health issues are important, so are agriculture issues, so are forestries and fisheries and livestock.
Tourism.
And tourism indeed, and particularly because we're talking about something that's touched the pockets of everybody. The economic development is something of great importance for this country and the region.
How can governments improve or enhance their outreach to the men on the street? I'm not talking about the technocrats like yourself, men on the street.
Indeed. I think there are always two approaches for a situation like this. One is top-down, and then we engage with the policymakers, we engage with the government, with the institutions that can communicate that and cascade down the message to the ground. But when you look from a bottom-up approach, when you go directly to the ground, you have to adapt the language, you have to adapt the communication, you have to drop the jargons, you have to drop the technical language, and you have to speak the people's language, something that is reality for them today, not tomorrow.
So my name is Yamit Daniet, and I am a senior specialist for the NDC partnership. This is a collaborative initiative bringing together more than 80 countries, 29 institutions, to really try to scale up and accelerate climate action around the world. This is not easy. I think we've been talking about the need to enhance climate action, to accelerate action, and countries find it difficult to make it happen on the ground. And it will not happen just, with political will. It will need every one of us to make this happen. So how do we do that together is really at the crux of the issue. And, we need to be humble. We need, stronger, more effective communication strategy to first of all make sure that we speak the same language. We understand the stakes, the opportunities, the challenges, but more importantly that we believe that with our endogenous knowledge, with our education, we can make this happen, because some of those solutions and best solutions are often within, not just from external experts. But it's a cooperation exercise, and we need enhanced human capacity to mobilize new capacity. Sometimes the capacity and knowledge are here, is our ability to really mobilize it effectively, and how we attract collaboration from not only governments but with private sector, public-private partnership, how we go from being a laboratory of ideas to marketing those ideas and bringing them at scale to really get the result at the scale that we need. So we hope that in workshops like we're participating today, that we learn from different actors what can be done, not to think in silos, to have programmatic approaches, but more importantly, to find ways to make sure that it doesn't stay with us, that it doesn't stay within our offices, that it trickles down to you, so that we could see as soon as possible the results that we want to see, and we don't just talk, but we walk really the talk together.
There's still, even though the whole climate change movement seems to be accelerating, there's still people out there who are cynics. And they still don't understand how climate change will actually affect different areas. Talk about some of the areas that can and will be affected by climate change.
Well, there are so many where to start. I think, as you said, it is important not to see climate change just as a climate meteorological issue, an environmental issue. It's a societal, economic issue which brings challenges and opportunity. Climate change, if climate change is about, the consequences is the impact that would exacerbate droughts, that would exacerbate floods, that will, in the end, affect what you will see in your plate when you want to eat, something, because, with more droughts, more flooding, it will affect, farmers' life and the ability to grow sustainable food, and affect the security of such supply of food. So at some point, countries and people will need to discuss, for how long am I going to benefit from this fresh fish? With some continuing to come through, and with if we use unsustainably so many pesticides, that how am I going to make sure that I will have yams or all those fresh food? Am I going to rely on importation, imports of food from abroad? So if there's a hurricane and there's no ships coming up, how am I going to to live sustainably if I depend, on imports, to have something on my plate and for my children? So these are some of the questions you could eventually, start discussing. How can we continue to depend on the supply of fossil fuel for our electricity? Can we generate our own electricity using renewable energy? Clearly, this has a cost at the beginning, but maybe the savings will outweigh the costs, over time. So how can we work with the government, with private sector, to de-risk and to reduce those costs upfront, so that everybody can embrace those new renewable, continuous supply of energy in a sustainable fashion, and see over time the bill reduced? How can we make sure that we consume also less energy, that we consume more wisely? It comes, to the consumption of plastics, to the consumption also of energy, so that, we don't create unnecessary demands, and we keep, our backyards a little bit cleaner, and do not affect our nature, so that, we continue to attract, tourists with, beautiful lands, because they are more preserved. How do we make sure that, the way to overcome some of the impacts or to reduce the impacts of hurricanes by making sure that our mangroves are not only preserved, but also maybe increased, because they do have a protective, functions. With the mangroves, they prevent us to have salty waters coming more and more inside our lands. So again, affective, our farmers and the production of food. So yes, there's different ways, different issues that we can talk together. how to best do that so that people are part of the solutions, and the governments find the right incentives to empower the people to go further faster.
Well, there you have it. As I mentioned a few minutes ago, those conversations were held on Thursday down at the Radisson Beach Resort as Grenada's focal points on climate change assembled to plan their strategies forward. These folks are doing their part, and it is my hope that in the weeks and days and years ahead, we, the Grenadian people, will also do our part. They can't do it on their own. They can. So please, stay tuned, because it seems like they're about to accelerate the efforts at mitigating against climate change and adapting to it as well, because there's some things that we're just going to have to face, huh? So please, don't get left behind. Pilgrims, we have now been joined here. Glenn Andrew Marks is in Michigan, where he's in a place called Ypsilanti. I think that's how you pronounce it. Ypsilanti, Ypsilanti in Michigan. Says it's 44 degrees Fahrenheit there. Now that makes a little bit more sense, which is not too bad. Not too bad. Not exactly summery weather, but not too bad. Lincoln Roberts. Lincoln is, I'm assuming, in Florida, where his sister Sharon was just visiting with him. And as you heard a little while ago, she's back in Grenada, so he's already missing her. Yeah. Donna Joseph is saying hi to you folks, and Margaret is also saying good morning, everyone. Good morning to you, Margaret. I certainly hope that you're on the mend. I'm not going to let the cat out of the bag this morning, but believe me, when We Chat rolls around on Thursday, I'm going to tell everybody about you. Everybody. So folks, please join us 8 o'clock on Thursday night right here on GrenadaBroadcast.com, Facebook, YouTube, for Margaret's episode. She had a bit of an episode yesterday, and that's why I said I hope she's feeling better. I certainly do, Margaret. You'll be fine. Take care. Okay, on that note, we're going to take a little break here, and then we'll come back with what I told you really need to hear. Don't you miss it. It's a response to the accusations that the Western media is being accused of bias against Venezuela. Break first, and then we will get to the National Report.
Together with you, our customers, we energize our community.
Together with you, we energize our economy.
We are working together to give our nation a better tomorrow.
With you, we energize our future. Together, we energize our nation.
Thank you for partnering with us as we energize our Speyside.
Grenlec, energizing our Grenada.
Labukan Creative Center, in association with Spice Basket, presents Mayhem in Paradise.
All the time you complaining I never had a steady job. Now I get an opportunity to get a permanent one. And woman, you acting up. I acting up? Yes, and you know why I didn't tell you, man? It's because of your stupid attitude, man.
My stupid attitude?
Yes.
You come this early morning pulling cutlass at me, right?
It's a play by Francis Urias Peters, together with a nostalgic folk musical journey, plus the Tivoli drummers at Spice Basket, Wednesday, February 6th. Tickets from Grenadian Optical and Kittens Drug Mart at $40 each. Children 12 and under, $25 at the door. It's a special independence production of drama, folk music, and dance, produced by Urias Peters, Wednesday, February 6th at Spice Basket, 8:30 p.m.
I'm always on the move. Training, traveling, competing.
A commemorative postage stamp.
So it's good to know I have Co-op Bank in the palm of my hand.
Introducing e-banking, one of many customer convenience services from Grenada Cooperative Bank, and there's more to come.
It's swift, simple, and secure.
Welcome home.
Grenada developing national water policy and national drought management plan. Details to this story and more in the national report. With the details to the news for Friday, February 1st, 2019, I am Sherian Noel. Grenada is currently developing a national water policy and national drought management plan, both of which could have a final draft by the end of this month. Dr. Everson Peters is the consultant on the National Drought Management Plan. He says the national water policy will seek to ensure that the present and future generations have access to sufficient and safe water, while the National Drought Management Plan will prepare for and mitigate against the impact of future drought events. Dr. Peters was addressing a joint conference on Friday on the current drought situation, implications for key sectors, and the way forward.
We want to ensure that we use the water efficiently, so that for agriculture, it means that choosing the type of irrigation that would minimize losses. So this is the policy. Now we have the National Drought Management Plan, and the goal of a drought management plan is during a period like now that we want to ensure the greatest public benefit for domestic water. First of all, domestic water, people drinking water. Then we want sanitation. We don't want diseases to be breaking out in schools if there's lack of water. And then we want irrigation. So while irrigation is important during a drought, the most important thing is for people to have water to drink. So when there are going to be restrictions, the first priority NAWASA has is to make sure people have water, sufficient water, and safe water to drink.
Grenada experienced a serious drought in 2010, and Dr. Peters warns that this can become a regular occurrence for which we must be prepared, utilizing the water policy and drought management plan.
This drought that we're talking about, we're now experiencing, there was prediction sometime in September that this is what is going to happen. If we have a plan, then we're not going to wait until January. If there's a plan that I suspect the Water Resources Management Unit or agency that is going to be established later in the year, going to be managing this thing. So by September, people will say, listen, you know, you have to start conserving. For the people in Carriacou, it means that you have to maintain as much of the water in the cisterns as possible.
The final draft of both initiatives will be available by the end of this month and will be available for public review and comments before they go to the Minister and Cabinet. Meanwhile, Minister for Agriculture and Lands, Honorable Yolan Dane Horsford, says there is need for a national effort to mitigate against the challenges of drought. This has become more urgent with the prediction of long-term drought this year for Grenada, Antigua, North Bahamas, Cuba, East Jamaica, and St. Kitts.
One of the major activities in the implementation of a monitoring system to record is the implementation of a monitoring system to record the impacts on water supplies, soil degradation, and agricultural production. This will entail the collection of data on crops and vegetations, river flows, reservoirs, ponds, rainfall stations, pest diseases, livestock, and generating reports for dissemination to relevant stakeholders.
A proposed meeting Friday by Labour Commissioner Mr. Cyrus Griffith to provide conciliation in the pension negotiations impasse did not take place, as the public sector trade unions failed to show up, following the deadlock in talks in January and in response to the referral of the matter by the head of the government's Pension Engagement Committee to the Ministry of Labour. The Labour Commissioner invited the trade unions to a conciliation meeting on February 1st. Through correspondence received by the Labour Commissioner after the scheduled 9:30 a.m. start time for the meeting, the union said in part that it would be futile to convene the proposed meeting. Separate correspondence addressed to the chairman of the government's Pension Engagement Committee confirmed that the unions and staff associations have found it necessary to pursue the demands of the pensionable benefits for public officers through the legal process. Prior to Friday's planned meeting with the unions and the staff associations, the Labour Commissioner held a separate meeting with the Pension Engagement Committee. The Labour Commissioner will now report the matter to the Labour Minister for his mediation, in keeping with the established procedures for settling disputes. The government's Pension Engagement Committee and the public sector trade unions have already agreed on the need for pension for public officers. The issue at hand is the advance payment of pension, which is commonly referred to as gratuity. This is the National Report. More news after the break.
The pride and joy of a nation is its flag. Its colors and arrangement makes it significant and stunningly beautiful. On Wednesday, February 6th, it's National Colors Day. Every proud Grenadian is asked to deck off in clothing highlighting the colors of our flag. Whether you are dressed for work, daily routines, or casual engagements, showcase the true Grenadian spirit. Every ministry, every department, and all workplaces are encouraged to join in. National Colors Day, Wednesday, February 6, 2019. Endorsed by the National Celebrations Committee. Our people, our colors, our day. On Wednesday, February 6th, National Colors Day.
Threat networks have the potential to cripple fragile socio-economic progress. That warning from Deputy Commissioner of Police Franklin Redhead when he addressed the Regional Security System RGPF panel discussion held in Grenada. He said the threat networks fuel corruption and have great potential to cripple regional economies.
Transnational threat networks, whether in the form of transnational organized crime, transnational or transregional terrorist organizations or violent extremist networks, pose increasingly complex and existential challenges to regional states. Many have global reach, they are adaptive, they fuel violence and corruption, and undermine effective democratic governance. Threat networks vary widely in motivation, structure, activities, operational focus, and composition. They tend to operate among civilian populations and in seams of society and have many components that are recognized locally as legitimate parts of society. Of course, the multidimensional and multifaceted nature of the risks and threats faced by Caribbean states are increasingly interconnected, cross-cutting, network-centric, and transnational.
Economic disparity, poverty, high cost of living, and social exclusion are factors that enable these networks. Deputy Commissioner Redhead urged member countries to formulate the best strategy to defeat threat networks.
It takes a network or networks to defeat a network. And therefore, it takes multiple solutions to address problem sets. And in effect, this is what they are. And this is why a multi-sectoral approach is a strategic imperative in suppressing the consequences, effects, and the wicked problems that threat networks can pose to our hemisphere and national security. We need to ask ourselves some questions. Are we addressing the relevant issues? And are we addressing the root cause of these challenges? And one of the questions that we need to ask is, are we too traditional in our approaches, rooted in old methods and old ways of doing things?
The regional security system consists of 7 member countries that collaborate to strengthen regional security and build awareness on threats and crimes that many regions face. And finally, independence celebrations continued on the sister isle as Carriacou shared in the festivities. It was a show of support as students, uniformed clubs, teachers, and other patriotic residents came out in their numbers to witness and participate in the 2019 Independence Rally at the Hillsborough Recreation Ground. Minister for Carriacou and Petit Martinique Affairs, Honorable Kendra Maturin-Stewart, reflected on the theme for this year's independence celebrations. Minister Maturin-Stewart encouraged all present to work together to help build resilience and enhance the social and economic transformation of Grenada.
Resilience is strength, toughness, robustness, our ability to rebound after disaster, misfortune, or distress. These are the characteristics and attributes that are required in nation building, and these are what will make us successful as a people. But we must use these characteristics, my friends, to strengthen or enhance our social and economic conditions. We must improve the lives of our people through social programs and through economic growth. We must improve on our service delivery, our agricultural production, our tourism product, our fisheries, our light manufacturing, our healthcare, education, infrastructure.
Governor General Her Excellency Dame Cecile Grenada said after 45 years, Grenada and Carriacou exhibit clear signs of maturity, which is evident in the continuous developments within the state.
The people of the Sister Isles now see a marked improvement in the availability of water to their homes and businesses due to the establishment of desalination plants in Petit Martinique and in Carriacou. The completion of the new port facility in Harvey Vale marks another major step towards improving the infrastructure with resulting increased economic benefits.
This year's parade featured a military display outlining and symbolizing Grenada's 45th year as an independent nation, alongside cultural presentations.
We are from if you free, the white island of the West Indies. We are happy, peaceful, and gay, beautiful and healthy everywhere, and the warm sunshine every day. Sweet Carriacou, celebrate your independence. Sweet Carriacou, celebrate your independence. Independence celebration. Independence celebration. Oh.
And with this, we come to the end of the National Report for Friday, February 1st, 2019. I am Sherry-Ann Noel.
Grenadian General Insurance Company, strength and stability. Grenadian General Insurance Company, tell your friends, tell your family. We cover householders comprehensive, motor and even fire too. Contractors all risk burglary, public liability, professional indemnity.
reliability and weight. We still have more. Come and find out more what you're waiting for.
We are located on Scott Street, St. George's. For more information, call 440-2434.
Tell everybody.
Juve chocolates, cocoa nibs, and cocoa balls from Diamond Estate Grenada are now available at Amazon.com, Amazon.ca, Amazon.co.uk, and GrenadaMarket.com. Try the sensational touch of nutmeg and a touch of ginger chocolates, 75% dark and rich, 100% pure cocoa, and their 60% dark and sweet chocolate bars today. Amazon Prime members enjoy free shipping on these orders in the USA, Canada, and Europe. GrenadaMarket.com. When you can't come to the island, the products of the island will come to you.
Hey, Lynn.
Hey, neighbor.
Here's the bill I asked you to pay for me.
How did you get your electricity bill to be so low?
For one, we size our transformers just for what we need. And we unplug transformers, chargers, and other devices when they're not in use. We also replaced our light bulbs with LEDs.
They burn less energy, right?
Much less. I even replaced the seal on my refrigerator door to keep the cold air in.
And Grenlec is always advising us not to open the fridge too often.
That's right. And my family washes and irons in bulk.
With fuel prices changing all the time, how do you know if it is working?
We pay attention to the usage history table. Over time, our average usage has decreased.
So while Grenada can't control fuel prices, I can conserve energy and save money.
Grenlec, energizing our Grenada.
Alrighty, folks, it's now, 13 minutes away from 10 o'clock. As the Venezuelan crisis continues, with no end in sight, Western media have been accused of being biased in their reporting, particularly against Venezuelan President Maduro. Even here in Grenada, local voices are emerging with their perception of what has given rise to the Venezuelan crisis and the political machinations which are fueling a very volatile situation just about 100 miles from our doorsteps. On yesterday's edition of Sundays with George Grant, two of those voices were heard sharing their perspectives. The complete interview can be heard on both the Grenada Broadcast Facebook page and on our YouTube page. However, this morning, I'd like to bring you just a few excerpts from that interview. The voices of Dr. Terence Marichaux of the Grenada Venezuela Solidarity Committee and Mr. John Rello, who is a former citizen of Venezuela. Here we go.
Well, first of all, Venezuela is concerning for us because Venezuela is an integral part of our region.
Mm-hmm.
Venezuela plays a pivotal role in the development of many of our Caribbean states, and they have rendered assistance to Grenada and to many Caribbean islands in many respects, in many, many regards. Here in Grenada, we know about the Petro-Carib deal, which has stabilized prices for petroleum products in Grenada for the last how many years since it started. Venezuela provides infrastructural assistance. They have built, they have contributed to the building of the Market Square, the Roy St. John playing field, the La Colombe project, the Miracle Eye program, which benefited many, many Grenadians. And the situation with Venezuela today has to be of concern not only to us as individuals, but the entire region, the entire Caribbean
and the world, in fact, because as we see, the whole world is zeroing in on Venezuela, especially in light of the latest attempts by the US administration to install a puppet who has not faced the electorate, he has not been elected as president of the country. And the underlying reason behind all of this is not democracy as they try to make it look. It's not the suffering of the Venezuelan people who they have contributed to increasing through sabotages, through sanctions, through every means possible, even direct involvement in the assassination of their president. But the fact that what is really at the heart of this problem here is Venezuelan resources, the oil, the gold, all of the mineral resources that Venezuela has. It's not about democracy, because when we see the shady kinds of characters that the US support all over the world in the name of democracy, and then you have a country which has free and fair elections for years and years. Even the Carter Center said once that Venezuela probably has the best democratic system in the world. And today you have people go to the ballot box and vote for a president who wins the last elections in May of last year with 67 or 68% of the vote. And then you have other people all over the world who, in fact, even in the very United States, today you have a wildly unpopular government, wildly unpopular president. And nobody is getting up and saying, okay, well, Nancy Pelosi and the Democrats just won overwhelmingly in the last midterm elections, that we should install Nancy Pelosi because she's more popular and the Democrats are more popular today. You have to go through the democratic process, and they have done so. At heart of it is the oil. That's all they want. In fact, the National Security Advisor, John Bolton, said recently, and he was quoted as saying, that this is an oil coup. And if American businessmen were to get their hands on Venezuela's oil, what a tremendous boost that would be for the US economy. Yes. So it's all about oil. It's not about the suffering. And the suffering of the people is orchestrated, mind you. It is not about the policies of the government.
Okay, stop for a minute here, because I want to touch on a couple of things. First of all, you talked about the free and fair elections. There are people who will argue that they really went through a fair democratic process. That's an argument that has been put forth. But I'm also hearing the argument that you're making now that this really ain't about that. It's about oil.
It is about oil.
Okay, I mean, that's becoming very clear more and more. But how do you stand firm on your belief that they had free and fair elections?
I do. It is part of an orchestrated campaign that has been going on for 20 years. This didn't start yesterday. Yesterday, for example, the Bolivarian people of Venezuela celebrated 20 years of revolution. And in the streets of Venezuela, the Caracas Mall, or whatever they call it, there were thousands and thousands of people. You know what one of the newspaper, writing newspapers in the United States reported? That there were 350 people. 350 people.
Yeah.
Maduro, we're not saying he hasn't made his mistakes, and this government has not. I mean, they talk about corruption, and I'm sure it's not institutionalized. I mean, look how much corruption is going on in the United States right now. So it's not about all of that. The government itself was elected popularly. The opposition, not all of them, some of them boycotted the election. Some of them participated. Now, if you choose, and the one who would have just installed as the interim president, Juan Guaido, his party didn't participate in the election. They boycotted the election. If you choose to boycott the election, that is your choice. The elections went ahead. They knew it was going to go ahead. And they went ahead and had elections. Maduro won with 68% of the popular vote, with 48% of the people participating. Much less than how much participated in the Trump election, which was something like 21 or 22%. So when we're talking about democracy, let us talk democracy. If that's what you're about, then let us see that you are supporting democracy. But when you're coming out and say blatantly that this is about an oil coup and how much it would contribute to the American economy if American businessmen were able to get that oil in Venezuela and develop it. Now, the oil reserves in Venezuela are the Venezuelan people own. It belongs to them. And one of the good things about the Chavez government, which was continued under Maduro, is that they have used a lot of the oil wealth to eliminate poverty. 50% poverty has, over the years, everything was controlled by the oligarchy. But they have reduced poverty by 50% since the Maduro Chavez government has been in power. And they have redistributed the wealth so that the ordinary people participate. But the oligarchy doesn't want that. The US powers in Washington don't want that. They don't want, anywhere there's a popular revolution, they try at every instance to crush it. And then you call the name socialism, and you see Cuba, who has played a pivotal role also in Venezuela, helping with the medical system and all of that. Just like in Grenada. Grenada, Cuba, Grenada, Venezuela. Crush it. There's the MO. There's a blueprint for all of this. A blueprint that has been developed over the last 20 years. And if you go in and really read about the history of Juan Guaido, and you see what he has been promoted to do over the years, you'll know that this guy is not up to anything good. All he wants to do is to put the oil reserves and all of the resources of the Venezuelan people back into the hands of the oligarchy, and by extension, U.S. interests in the United States.
All right, I don't want to get too far behind here, but Margaret out there in New York, she says, yep, Bolton was very clear in saying that it is oil.
Yes, it is oil.
She also says here she agrees with you on the U.S. involvement in Venezuela and Latin America, but will also question a lot of Maduro's actions.
For example, what? What are his actions? He has basically continued the same programs of the Chavez government, which is to put the resources back into the hands of the people to improve the standard of living of the people. Now, there's this question of corruption and corruption and corruption. But you can't overthrow a government and install a new government because of corruption. Every government has some level of corruption, but we say this is not an institutionalized thing.
It's not
and
just...
Venezuelan people have a right to resolve their problems for themselves. Why is there this blatant disregard for the sovereignty of the people, the independence of the people, and interfering in their internal affairs for the last 20 years since the Chavez government came into power?
Ryan out there in Florida says USA must clean its own house up.
Exactly.
And leave Venezuela alone.
Yes.
Okay. And Margaret says Maduro is not Chavez.
He's not Chavez. He doesn't have the charisma of Chavez. We know that. And what they try to put on him is that, oh, he was a bus driver and he was a union leader. Okay, so what? I mean, he has risen. I've heard and seen Maduro. And this man is as articulate as they can get anywhere in the world. He's a bright guy. He understands his people. And, you talk about dictators. He must be the most benign dictator I've ever seen in my life.
Alana Morris Van Tassel says, why not talk about how Maduro rigged his elections?
He did not. He did not. You don't rig elections with electronic voting. You don't do that. I tell you, even the Carter Center, Jimmy Carter himself, he was there monitoring elections in the past. And he says they have probably the best democratic system in the world because it is all electronic. In fact, only recently, the British representative in the United Nations talked about stuffing up ballot boxes. And this was the most ludicrous thing you can ever hear because somebody had to remind him that Venezuela doesn't have a ballot box electoral system. They have an electronic voting system. They have voting machines. So people go in, they vote. You can't rig that.
She also says, did not Chavez solely rely on oil? He really raped the country. Please, speak on this.
No, they do have a mono economy. There's no question about that. They have relied solely on oil. And incidentally, that is what has contributed to many of the hardships that the people are encountering right now. Because recently with the manipulation of the oil prices, especially when you're so dependent on oil, that it was like a stake in the heart of the Venezuelan economy. So a lot of the resources that they had that they would have used for their development and for buying things to benefit the Venezuelan people, could not happen because of the manipulation from the outside. They don't set the price of oil. Remember that. This is controlled by the bigger circles outside of Venezuela.
All right. Finally, she says here, my Venezuelan friend says they want a democracy, not a dictatorship.
Well, it's not a democracy because they vote. They go to the polls all the time. Why is it a democracy? When they go to the polls, no country has had more elections than Venezuela. If you check it out, no country goes to the voting booth more often than Venezuelans.
All right, I want to bring John in here, but just before I do, Kashawn Brathwaite says, facts don't lie. Socialism never works. People are starving in Venezuela.
People are starving in the United States. So capitalism is working in the United States? Is it working there? Homeless people in the richest country in the world? Starving people eating from garbage?
Eating rats?
Garbage pails in the United States? In the richest country in the world?
All right, let me bring John in here. JR, you're sitting here listening to Terry. I see you nodding your head. You must agree with a lot of what he's saying.
Well, Citizen Grant, thank you very much for the opportunity. And good morning to your listeners out there, your viewers, or what have you. Well, Citizen Grant, in truth and in fact, there isn't very much more to say after Seri had made his first volley there, you know. No, you said it all. But of course, we'll go into certain details. What we've seen before our eyes here is a prophecy coming through. In 1829, Simon Bolivar, the liberator of South America, made the following statement. I'll first say it in Spanish and then we'll translate. He said, Los Estados Unidos parecen ser destinados a plagar el continente americano con miseria en el nombre de la libertad. End of quote. And I urge my people to go on to memorable quotes by Simon Bolivar. Because, of course, the memorable quotes of a lot of people all over the world. Put his name. Memorable quote. And you will see there in English. Meaning, Citizen Grant, the United States seems to be destined by providence to plague the American continent with misery. And I want us to pay attention, misery in the name of liberty. So we have as a prophecy, 1829, 190 years ago. But thank God, that has been one of the philosophical bases that Comandante Chavez has inculcated or had in his, no, I say has because the philosophy is still there. Venezuelans know that. Venezuelans know. I speak to my people there from time to time. Well, as often as possible these days. 63% of the Venezuelan population in a poll recently done, and it can be more according to the profundity of this poll, do not want United States influence or interference or meddling or inherence, whichever you want to call it, in their affairs. Because Chavez had warned them, but Bolivar warned them, and they know the United States have no friends. They have interests. Terry mentioned about Bolton's statement. There it is. They're so brazen-faced today that they're saying it publicly. Exactly. It is not now this thing started. Chavez came around in the 1990s. He won the election a day like yesterday, 1998. And from since then, remember that they overthrew Chavez in 2002. The government of the United States have been undermining the government of Venezuela for years. They have conspired with the rich hitches, I call them, the oligarchs, the industrialists, and a great deal of them from foreign countries, including the United States. Look, mischief they have made against the poor Venezuelan people. Citizen Grant, the world I can tell you, I have seen, not that I have seen, pardon, some of the last things I saw before losing my sight in 2003 was in 2002 when 2.7 million liters of milk, fresh milk, was thrown into the lake of Maracaibo. Why? To starve the Venezuelan people. I tell you what they say. My sight was fading, but at least I saw these images. It isn't grand. Only about a year and a half, it is important to know these things. A year and a half ago in Carabobo State, in the middle of the Caribbean face of Venezuela, there was stink because 3.something million eggs were thrown away, destroyed. Why, Grant? To create scarcity, to starve the Venezuelan people, to provoke revolt against the government. Why? When Chavez took control of the oil industry and he decided to share the wealth with the Venezuelan people, to build houses, to build schools, university, create education and health, repair the infrastructure, 2.3 million houses fitted were given to the people of Venezuela, outfitted with all the necessities. The people's money, their money. I know, you can't do that. Socialism. Chavez called it socialism of the 21st century. But the Yankees don't want that. Why should these people be benefiting from things that we, Chavez, as a matter of fact, pulled the tete from them out? That is why they're getting crazy, Grant. And we have to say it as it is. They're liars. The United States manipulators. And they speak of democracy. What democracy? Fascism. Let me tell you something, man. People don't like to hear me say this. But in effect, what the United States is doing around the world is the same as Adolf Hitler had planned. It's the same. Fascism. Only recently, I think a couple of months ago, they celebrated or commemorated, should I say, the attack on the Polish ghettos in Ledis. It's the same thing. What did the Germans do around there? Because some of the Jews that were living there resisted them. They starved them to death, George. They roast them, they burn them, they shoot them down. Who came out alive, they put them into the concentration. Well, today I ain't going as far as, well, as serious the concentration camp as they were back then. But it's the same thing. If you don't submit yourself to me, I shall crush you. But the Venezuelan people today are quite conscious, and they know. Yes, there's some support for these political parties. An essential thing, an important thing that Terry hinted. The elections of May last year. These elections, all and sundry had the right to participate in it. There were 18 elections between 1998 and the current time in Venezuela. Are you talking about? The only country in the world that holds more elections and referendum on national issues is Sweden. Not Sweden, pardon. Switzerland. Anything of major concern at the national interest is taken to the people. You want more democracy than that? Democracy means people's involvement, the rule of the people. Fascism is when you impose upon people. And that's what the United States is practicing. And you ought to tell them that and tell them no for what they do. And it's not only, we in this here Grenada shouldn't only be in solidarity with the Venezuelan people and government, because the Venezuela has helped us to put up a school or a hospital or a market. That is true, and it's important to note, or we're benefiting from Petrocaribe. Clearly, we have to take this into consideration, but that's not all. What is clear and simple, that the act of calling upon one individual and saying, declare yourself, I will support you. So 3 votes came from the United States and a man becomes president of a country. What kind of thing is that, if I should put it in Grenadian, in this modern time? 3 votes from the United States, the president, the who else? Bolton, and what's the other one again? Pompeo. And that sets it right. No, that wouldn't work. Well, as a matter of fact, they're destined to fail already. Because the military, the army, navy, and so on of the Bolivarian Republic is well committed to their cause, because they know, they have been taught what to look for, and so they're prepared. This coup shall fail. And we as a people of the Caribbean, I'll end here, George, we as a people of the Caribbean had to talk crystal clear to the United States, because this area ought to be an area of peace. The United States is stimulating the Venezuelan people, provoking them, sucking fight. And this can't be correct. It can't be correct. We had to tell them. And we should not be holding any passive position as a Caribbean people on this. Because as I say, it's much more than what we get benefit from Venezuela's small countries. It is that an act of criminal immorality is taking place. And we have to challenge that. Would the Grenadian leaders want to see one day soon that somebody just pick on another Grenadian and say, you will be the Prime Minister of Grenada because Keith Mitchell is behaving mischievously? Would we like that? No. But it is possible according to these circumstances. And if these are the precedents that we set in this here world in 2019, we doomed. We have to challenge these people. They do not have it right and they're lying to the world. Terry made reference to this British representatives at the UN 2 weeks ago last week before Saturday. This man, what? Is that ignorance? No, it's by design. It is by design.
Alrighty, folks, just a reminder that was only an excerpt from the program which was aired yesterday morning, Sundays with George Grant, 9 o'clock. If you wish to see the entire interview, you can go to the part 1. Yesterday's program is on Facebook in 2 parts. Part 1 is where you'll find it, and you can check the entire thing out there. We have now gone over time. It's 11 minutes after 10 o'clock, eh? So let's pull the curtain down so you can go get some work done, okay? Before we do, let us hear an inspirational word. And today's word applies to those of you who may be facing challenges today, not knowing where to turn next. You're frustrated? Hey, listen to this. From the book of James, chapter 1, just one verse, verse 12. Blessed is the one who perseveres under trial, because, having stood the test, that person will receive the crown of life that the Lord has promised to those who love him. Okie doke, folks. On that note, Georgie Porgy's going to say thank you very much to those of you out there on Facebook. Program's going to be up there in just a wee bit. You can go on back, watch it in its entirety. And a little later on, it's also going to be up on YouTube. Sending God's blessings your way, and by his grace, let's all do it again tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock. So long. Yes, sirree. Very good morning to you.